For more than on the appeals court decision, we turn to Mark Doss, a supervising attorney and fellow with the International Refugee Assistance Project at the Urban Justice Center. And Mark, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
First, I want to get again to a point that we heard in Jan's piece as to the narrow scope of what the Ninth Circuit was considering. There were many arguments that were made either in the press or in the courts as to the discriminatory nature of the ban. But again, they considered the idea of national security and how it might have been compromised here. It seems an important distinction.
Absolutely. So what the court's doing is it's not reinstating the travel ban, and it's saying in response to the government's argument that the president's national security power is unreviewable. That's simply not true. The courts have a role to play in this. Obviously, the president has a lot of deference when it comes to national security, but that doesn't mean that he can go against the Constitution.
It also bears mentioning that there were certain parts of the ban that were for specific time limits. When you looked at those Syrian refugees, that was an indefinite ban placed. Ad infinitum had this essentially been allowed to stand. What is the real politic as it regards refugees, and certainly the what the statistics suggest is the threat they pose to national security?
There's just no threats that they pose. These are individuals who have already been extremely vetted. Syrians in particular go through extra vetting in addition, as opposed to other refugees. And so these are individuals who have been persecuted in their home. They're fleeing because of that persecution. They need to get to safety. The U.S. has always been a beacon of safety, and that's why they're coming here. They go through multiple layers of interviews, multiple biometric tests, security screenings from all the relevant security agencies. So there's absolutely no threat here.
That was as well a part of it. Essentially, the Ninth Circuit asked the government to make the case that the procedures currently in place were somehow deficient. We've heard people who stood in opposition to this ban even allow for perhaps we could review our vetting procedures, but again, from your perspective at least, the vetting procedures currently in place, we heard so much about extreme vetting, but they were by most definitions fairly extreme.
Exactly. So IRAP represents clients from the Middle East. We see our clients go through these vetting procedures. They wait years and years to come to the United States. This is not a situation where someone says, I'm a refugee and I get on the next plane to the United States. Our clients have waited over 2 years, 3 years, 4 years just to make it here to safety. And they're in real danger. They are not the ones who are persecuting people. They have been persecuted. They are running from terrorist groups like ISIS, like Al-Qaeda, because they are against those groups and then get persecuted by them.
Now, it was thought, regardless of what decision was reached, that this would be something of a layover on the way to the Supreme Court regardless. So now what do you make of the uphill climb it would appear the administration faces should they push forward with this executive order as written?
So the executive order as written is simply unconstitutional. And while the circuit court didn't rule on the constitutionality, they did say there is a very high likelihood that the plaintiffs, the state of Washington, will succeed on the merits. So while they haven't looked at the merits, it's very likely that the Trump administration will fail on that point.
Now, the Supreme Court would have to decide to hear this case if they did for whatever reason, and it split along ideological lines, if nothing else. A 4-4 deadlock at the Supreme Court level means that the Ninth Circuit decision stands, is upheld. How then will this inform the confirmation hearings of Neil Gorsuch?
I actually don't think it'll play a huge role because both the district court judge was a Republican appointed judge, and also the circuit panel, the Ninth Circuit panel, had a mix of appointees, one of them being a Bush-appointed judge as well. And so we're seeing from both the district court level and the appellate court level that regardless of who appointed you, there really isn't politics here. The Supreme Court will also find, I believe, that this is just unconstitutional regardless of the politics.
It's been pointed out, and I do have to get you out of here on this one, it's been pointed out that, again, the president could simply rescind this order, rewrite it, perhaps sit down with the agencies that many believe he should have sat down with in the first place, and resubmit if nothing else, seeing the framework of constitutionality he has to work in, ultimately, is it your thought that he'll do that, or do you see this pushing forward to the Supreme Court?
It looks like he's going to push forward. He's made a lot of very quick decisions, and I don't know if he'll spend the time writing a new executive order.
Mark Doss, fascinating look at what has certainly been a fascinating thing to watch play out in these first 3 weeks of the administration. Mark, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.